So if there's no objection, I'll call the meeting to order because we don't have a chair approved quite yet, and then the chair can, or vice chair can take that over from me. So today is Tuesday, April 12th, and this is the Town of Rome Joint Community Development Authority and Plan Commission Subcommittee meeting. Roll call.
Coleman here.
Baker.
Shermahorn here.
Capel here.
And then Emily Zeddy's zoning administrator is joining us. She'll eventually take over these meetings too as part of zoning administration. Jamie Gabert and Attorney Flanagan. And we'll have Emily do the certification of the posting of this meeting.
The agenda for the April 12th joint CDA and Plan Commission Subcommittee meeting was posted at the following locations on April 7th. Rome Municipal Building at 1:23 p.m. Leicester Public Library of Rome, 1:41 p.m. Nakusa Port Edward State Bank at 1:34 p.m. It was emailed to the Wisconsin Daily Tribune at 1 p.m. and emailed to the town website at 1:59 p.m.
Can I have an approval of the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Citizen comments, there was no comment cards received. We do have citizens here though today, and you can feel free to join the conversation as appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay. No action contemplated except possible referral to future agenda. Are there any information updates, recent correspondence, current events, or announcements anyone would like to share? The only thing I'll share as we get into this is I'm thinking this first meeting's gonna be a little messy as we figure out our progress. So just no mess, little chaos equals progress in the end. We'll figure it out together. Discussion and possible action on the following items. Introduction of members. Why don't we just go around, I know most everyone probably knows most everyone from some other situation, but just, if you just wanna say your name and the committee that you are coming from and how long you've been with that committee. Bill, you can start.
I'm Bill Capel, and I've been with the Community Development Authority since it was reconstituted in 2014, and I also serve as secretary of that committee.
My name is Sharon Shermahorn, and I'm on the same committee Bill is, and I've been on it now almost be 2 years.
Mike Baker. I'm on the Planning Commission. I've been on the commission since about 2018 and have been the chairman since 2020.
Dan Goldman, representing Plan Commission. I've been on there a year now in my current term on the town board, but prior to that I was on for 4 or 5 years.
So discussion and action, election of officers. Is there someone that would like to be chair of this committee?
Nope.
No.
I have somewhere I have to go.
Can we nominate?
You can. Otherwise, with prior subcommittees, we've also had non-members chairing the meeting too, as long as there's a vice chair, so if they're absent.
Ah,
So I know with the Rome Town Center subcommittee, I think the zoning administrator had
Greg.
chaired the meeting.
right.
And we just put somebody as a backup in the event that they couldn't. I'm not suggesting Emily do it. That wasn't a suggestion that she do it necessarily, more that Jamie's really good at chairing.
Oh, nice.
I was going to wonder if the city administrator would mind sharing.
I don't know, this is the town administrator maybe.
The town administrator. Town administrator, I'm sorry. Old habits die hard.
That's okay. That would be fine. And could we just do all three in one motion? Would that be okay?
Mhm.
Okay. So if I would serve as chair, vice chair,
I'd be willing to do that.
great. And secretary?
A reminder that probably with secretary, it is, will assist with the preparation of the minutes usually.
Yep.
And it would just be signing the minutes.
So it would just be signing the minutes?
Yeah, I don't think it's an extensive, set of duties to be the secretary.
You wouldn't have to do similar to what you do with CDA, that we would, yeah.
Okay, I would get a lot of assistance is what you're saying, if I agreed to do it. I'll agree to be secretary. Unless you want it.
No, I don't even have a computer where I could type it up on.
It's not, you don't have to worry.
Then the slate of officers would be myself as chair, Supervisor Coleman as vice chair, and Bill Keppel as secretary. Could I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion that those persons named be nominated for those positions.
Great. Second?
I second it. I can do that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Jamie, do you need to step out? It was chief asking. Otherwise, if you need to, I can pick up the agenda.
So discussion and possible action, approval of the March 8th, 2022 joint meeting minutes. That was our first joint meeting, and it was a bullet pointed list of some of the things that we discussed. If everybody's had an opportunity to review those, we'd take a motion for approval.
I'll move approval.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Right. So then, discussion and possible action, establish a subcommittee goals and timeline. We did maybe put together somewhat of a draft timeline under the, future agenda items for today, because we thought it might take a little while to get through what our process would be and how we're gonna discuss each chapter. We only did one chapter, but going forward, we thought maybe at the next meeting, we could do 3, 4, and 5, and then 6, 7, and 8. So that would be 3 meetings to do comprehensive plan. I can see through those 3 meetings, there might be recommendations to Plan Commission, but we could handle those items following that review of the comprehensive plan, just to keep them in somewhat of a regular cycle or flow.
Can I just, maybe add one comment? This would be just a tentative schedule because there are some chapters, particularly the land use chapter, that may take more than one meeting. And so that may be best to pull that one out and similar to today, handle land use just as one meeting because that's going to potentially have text and map amendments. And likely is going to take some time to work through. And so maybe something similar to this, but over 4 meetings, because then we can have at least one meeting dedicated to land use.
Good point.
Are there other goals or, let's say, rules of the road that we want to establish for the committee? So we just have them as like our upfront guidance going forward?
Perhaps we just want to refresh on what the original intent of the subcommittee is.
So I think the original intent was that items that were coming to the Plan Commission, we knew we were experiencing growth and we want to experience growth, but we want to make sure that it fits within the guidelines of what we've established as our future vision for the town. So what we're really looking at the Plan Commission comprehensive plan document is to say, do these goals and objectives match what our future vision is? And if they don't, how do we adjust that? And if they do, how do we ensure that's how our zoning code is put forth to equal that vision we want to see?
And our output ultimately to be a draft of a comp plan amendment that goes back to both the respective committees?
Yes, and then through town board and county board, because,
It'd go to both of the respective committees, but the process for amending it is going to be Plan Commission, public hearing with that Plan Commission, and then town board. But certainly, your respective committees can be updated as we go through this. I would just add to Jamie's comments that, so by statute, we know that we have to update our comprehensive plan once every 10 years. That's the mandatory update. And that doesn't mean that we don't have reason, and particularly with this town, we have plenty of reason to review our comprehensive plan more frequently than that. Now, in recent years, we've seen a large number of what I would call piecemeal amendments being requested. That isn't uncommon, as somebody maybe wants to develop property and its future land use map is not consistent and zoning is not consistent. You'll see comprehensive plan, map amendments that come to the plan commission. I think over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a recognition that this has been more frequent, that maybe there was good reason to review our goals, objectives, and policies more, the broad part of the comprehensive plan more frequently than just the mandatory 10 years. The idea being that this subcommittee would really do a interim review and possible recommending some amendments to it that would be then, it would be closer to a 10-year comprehensive amendment than that piecemeal amendment style that I was talking about. Just looking at the some of the comments that we've received, it's going to be a larger amendment. It's going to be potentially a text amendment along with just the potential future map or land use map amendment as well. So I think that is all in line with kind of what I understood the intent was. The goal here would be to work through the comprehensive plan, as was stated. Once we get that updated, to review our zoning ordinance and potentially make recommendations for the zoning ordinance that fall in line with how we've updated our comprehensive plan. That isn't to say that we'll make a lot of adjustments, but we really should be going through our zoning ordinance and making sure it's consistent, certainly with the comprehensive plan as we amend it.
If there's more we wanna add to that or change to that, now's the time though that we kind of, again, put that framework out there.
You're saying that in regards to what?
To the purpose of the committee, for
Okay,
the
alright.
ultimate end goal.
I think Nick stated it pretty well.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep. The only other thing I would put out there as we talk about our goals is just keep an open mind. We are likely not all gonna agree on all the stuff that we talk about, and also, think about it on a town-wide perspective, on how it would influence both what would be Lake District or outside of Lake District, how it would be, is it, enforceable, is it, I mean, keep those more granular thoughts in mind too, cause sometimes comp plan can get very big picture, and the zoning gets very small picture. So, I can see that we might have times where those two things are gonna conflict. Okay. And then we'll shoot for 3 chapters next time and 3 chapters the time after. We might wanna start just a little bit earlier next time if we're gonna do 3 chapters.
Can I just add one thing, just to make sure that everybody's clear? Your comprehensive plan is your planning document, right? Your zoning ordinance is your enforcement document. There should be, in fact, there has to be consistency with the comprehensive plan where you make amendments to your zoning ordinance, where you do. Land divisions also need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Remember, the plan is your long-range planning document. The ordinance is your enforcement document.
Yeah, so if the intent is to propose ordinance changes, I think I'm having a hard time understanding how we're going to accomplish that in certain situations.
Yeah, so on all of the agendas, we'll have item number 12, which is referral to Plan Commission on zoning code. Trying to think of one that would be potentially related to tonight, but I think it's one of those things as we review each chapter of the comp plan, if there's something that comes up that would be zoning related, we'll take that down as a means of which to keep track at Plan Commission about how those amendments might be reflected.
Yep.
And I'd propose a slightly different way of doing that one. So I think we can keep a list of items. I don't know that, but for the same reason that we're doing this in more of a comprehensive fashion, I don't think we want to
Piecemeal.
send single things to the plan
Oh,
commission
no.
piecemeal. I would say that number 12 can be on there, but more as a list. When we get, I think there's going to be a lot more when we get to the actual zoning ordinance to answer Supervisor Goldman's comments. So once we get past the comprehensive plan, then we may go through the zoning ordinance, for example, and look at permitted and conditional uses, right? And ask if that list is what we want. Frankly, after Act 67, we probably should be doing that, and it's been overdue to do it. But because of the consistency piece, it makes every bit of logical sense to do this comp plan overview before we would go there. But that's the kind of zoning ordinance review that we would likely be doing. It's not to say that we couldn't break out our entire zoning ordinance and go through the whole thing. That's a lot. Maybe the starting point would be to go through something like our permitted and conditional uses and ask if those are consistent with our comprehensive plan as we've amended it.
That makes sense. The logistics of it, because if you read, when we get into it here, objective 1, policy 1, well, you might as well get the whole manual out and slap it on the desk, so.
So then we'll go to discussion and possible action. Review track change modifications to chapter 2, natural, agricultural, and cultural resources, goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. So, 2 handouts. First is that compiled comment that we had put together. I know Plan Commission has seen this before, and I think I did give them all to CDA at least once. But here's the compiled comments from both CDA, Plan Commission, and staff for chapter 2. And then what's highlighted in green is the items that Emily has added from our comments over to the goals and objectives. Those things were the more tangible things, like making sure 14 Mile Watershed Alliance is represented in the plan, because maybe it wasn't represented in the plan in 2016. Changing things that were to get to maintain, like Bird City. The items that are not highlighted are items that are less tangible and more discussion based, like, do we want to change those in the comp plan? How do we feel those things are working?
Can I start with a tangible and not intangible, or not tangible? So looking at the track changes version that Emily had prepared and provided us, I think that is far more helpful to see how that might plug in to these particular objectives. I do have a couple comments. First off, policy 5 under objective 3. It should be to update, not updates. Just a small edit. Do you see where I'm? Okay.
Yep.
And then the other one, and it would be more of a larger piece, I think, for this subcommittee's discussion. As I look at now, this feedback fit into the goals, objectives, and policies. I read policy 3 under objective 1 and question if that really fits there. Is it, for example, referencing aesthetic quality? If not, then I think potentially maybe that fits under objective 4 better. That's just to get you started.
So, yeah, I'd almost agree that policy 3 under objective 1 that was added should go under objective 4, and perhaps policy 2 that was added under 4 might go under 1, or objective 1, if that makes sense. One I'm referring to is maintain low density development in areas where there may be environmental concerns. And maybe even strike the environmental concerns part from that and reword it a bit to go with more objective one.
Yeah, I was gonna say is that certainly I think what we've heard at Plan Commission is not just necessarily where there are environmental concerns.
Yeah, it's just density in general.
How does the committee as the whole feel of flip-flopping those two and taking out, so policy number 2, which is currently under objective number 4, would move to objective number 1, policy number 3, and just say maintain low-density development?
Repeat that, please.
It would be swapping policy 2 of objective 4
Right?
with policy 3 of objective 1.
Just flip-flopping them?
Yes, and policy 2 would be adjusted to end at areas and striking the language where there may be environmental concerns.
Okay, I got it.
Of course, somewhere that means we have to define what density is.
Or what? Yeah, what you mean by low density.
Yeah.
That's a good one, I call it the parking lot, but
Yeah.
that's a good one I'm putting in the parking lot.
That would ultimately relate to the zoning ordinances, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
What is considered a low-density development?
I can support that.
So a comment that's under objective number 1, that came from one of the committees. I'm not sure we're utilizing the resource maps to help guide decisions on what protections we should be seeking in considering new developments. The word protections there, I'm wondering, cause that can take a lot of forms. Is there a piece of that protections that needs to go into the into the objectives? I think of when we sell property in Rome Town Center, we develop a developer's agreement. Again, that's a granular thing, but are there items about protections that need to get added into these objectives?
Well, since that was my comment, I guess I can.
Oh. Not to pinpoint you, I didn't know it was your
No.
comment.
I generally made comments as opposed to specific points, but, so that thought was after reading policy 1, using control measures. Okay, great, I know that we've got maps that identify where there are resources that we want to protect. Then theoretically, we have zoning in place to protect those resources. That's where we get in the nitty-gritty of comparing, okay, what do we have in the code now versus what can we put in there, or maybe need to put in there, based on the development we're starting to see. Or maybe there's areas that are lacking. That was my thought process on that. So I guess my comment was more, I agree that we have a policy, but are there any teeth to what we're saying?
So reconciling my earlier comment,
Yep.
this is the plan, so as I read that, I think great fit with our review of zoning ordinance, right? That is a great example of one where that would fit into our review of the zoning ordinance to ask, do we have teeth to effectuate the plan, right? Because we wouldn't put a requirement like that in our comp plan. We would put a requirement like that in our zoning ordinance if it made sense to carry through our vision in the comp plan. Does that make sense? So I think that is a great comment, one that we should probably add to the parking lot, so to speak, with the zoning ordinance overview.
I will add another one. I don't know if it's also Supervisor Coleman's comment, but, Gateway District. That's brought up under objective number 3. It's brought up in a series of places as we go through the chapters. Gateway District is in zoning, but it's mentioned several times in comp plan. And I think this is a good place to have the conversation. Has the gateway accomplished what we wanted it to accomplish? Does it need to be adjusted or changed?
Tell me, refresh my memory on the pros and cons of an overlay district. Because that's
And remember,
what
we
this
have
is starting to
planning.
get into, and that's one of my questions, Nick. Tell me the pros and cons or the value of an overlay district versus placing something right into the zoning ordinance.
Well,
Is it because you can, can you change something that has already been zoned and not have to grandfather it?
no, if the use
Yes.
is existing, then it's going to be non-conforming. I think, so what you're asking, you're probably recalling, because you were on the subcommittee, I gave an overview to that subcommittee at that time of overlay versus zoning or an ordinance amendment.
Yeah.
That was a consideration with the Rome Town Center subcommittee on whether or not they wanted to create a overlay district in the town center or put the new regulations right into the
Right.
zoning ordinance. All I would ask would be, I can provide that to this group in the same kind of form that I did. I think I gave some handouts for the last, when we did that at the subcommittee.
Mhm.
That would probably be a better way of answering that than to try to come up with that off
That's-
the top of my head. I know there's
that's
a few
fine.
things that come to mind, but really those are going to come into play at the time of the zoning ordinance, but are good things to keep in mind.
Yeah.
If you're wondering if an option or if there'd be value in eliminating the overlay district and incorporating that right into zoning, there's pros and cons to that.
And I'm looking at both ways. I'm looking at, do we want to create more overlays as we go through this and we're getting to the zoning issue, or do we want to dispense with them and incorporate it into the language of the zoning change? So
We definitely went
I need to
through-
understand it better in order to talk sensibly about it.
We definitely went through the pros and cons of that.
I know
in
we
that
did.
subcommittee,
I just-
at length, I think.
I'm not senile yet, but I just don't remember.
So for the next meeting, as just general information, not necessarily that it needs to be used for the next meeting, but is good to have, I will provide the documents that I provided to the subcommittee at that time.
Thank you.
I believe that had a pros and cons
I think it did.
of overlay versus zoning.
I'd just like to make a comment, since we try to involve, the public in, on their, comments regarding this plan, and we wrote, we kept track of them and we have them here. I've lived here 20 years, and I have no idea what the town's gateway corridor is. Do the people out there have any idea what that is? Is there anywhere that explains that? And I don't mean to sound stupid, but it's mentioned so much in this plan. And if you're asking people in the town of Rome to read this over and come up with questions about the different objectives and policies and that, I guess, do they know what that is?
So it's defined in chapter 360. It's also, as I said, that certain things come to mind for pluses and minuses with overlays. It is one of the negatives with an overlay, right? Is having to be aware of the base zoning district regulations and be aware that there's an overlay district and what additional enhanced regulations exist there. There is a section for gateway overlay district in chapter
I'll have
360.
to look at it.
Sharon, to your maybe add on to that, unless you own property that's a bit east and west on Alpine and D here, and then north and south on 13, and own,
You don't know
that or a
about it.
business, you probably know nothing about it.
That, that's, I was gonna say the same thing, that's, unless you were in the gateway itself, you probably did not pay any attention to it when it was going on.
We can also include that in next month's packet though too, the gateway overlay piece. I just, if, then under objective number 3, my suggestion would be on policy number 4, if we're going to add policy number 5, work with current businesses inside the gateway corridor to update appearances. I don't know that you need it in policy number 3, because I think the conversation has been that we want the design plan and appearance of development within the town in a manner that's consistent with sound economic land use and design principles. I think we want those things for all development, not just within the gateway corridor, especially if we're gonna call out that corridor in policy number 5. So it would,
I agree, cause it says current businesses, well, what if you get new businesses?
So I think policy 4 probably already covers what am I trying to say? 4 is good as is, we just need to do things on the zoning end and or other, not necessarily make a change in the comp plan language, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm just, if we are gonna add, and we wouldn't have to, but if we wanted to add in that policy 5, then I think it's redundant to have the gateway corridor in the one above. If you leave gateway corridor in the one above, then I hear what you're saying, then we don't need policy number 5. Because that's probably more of a zoning issue that we need to take up with them than a comp plan issue.
Yeah.
Or are you saying take gateway out entirely?
If we take out policy number 5, then I'd leave gateway in. If we leave policy 5 in, I say take gateway out.
Policy 5 seems to be just adding more emphasis to that particular area as opposed to looking at it globally on the whole town.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's kind of superfluous. If we are gonna enforce equally around the town, it would fall into the gateway as well. So we don't need it. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, yeah.
I would agree. I think we could take it out. I don't think we need to add that and leave 4 as it is. It looked like it was being added just for emphasis reason.
Are we comfortable with taking policy 5 out and then leaving policy 4 as is? Okay. There was quite a bit added then, in objective number 4, we already changed that first policy number 2, but then we also had consider the impact on wildlife habitat, potential locations of rare plant and animal species and archaeological sites before approving land use changes, preserve the integrity of resources, promote the ecological value of the land, and minimize adverse impacts upon adjacent properties by discouraging incompatible development and alterations to vulnerable and valued landscapes. I didn't need bifocals before this job, and the green print's not helping.
That did not translate to print well.
So that policy 3 and objective 1 that was added in this draft that we talked about moving here might be able to be combined with one of these, 3 and 4, under objective 4. Or not, I don't know.
That policy 3 and,
3 and 3 are,
3 and 4 are almost exactly the same.
Yeah. I would agree with Supervisor Bowman on that. We could likely, now that we've moved policy 3 from objective 1 to objective 4, we could combine those all together into one. and wordsmith it to
Mhm.
reflect all those items.
Anything that's wetland or water related, you could probably add into policy, objective 4, policy 1 that previously existed.
Does, policy 3 and objective 4 give you a little bit more detail, in conjunction with policy 3 out of objective 1? Gets a little bit more specific and detailed, rather than just moving policy 3 to number 4, to objective 4. Consider some of the other things that are mentioned in policy 3 of objective 4. You know, you got water, aquifers, wetlands, slopes, woodlands, but then the other one goes into just a little bit more detail. You know, the animals, the plants, archaeological use or sites. Would that, some of that language be appropriate then, if you're gonna move policy 3 down to objective 4 as well, to consider adding? That make any sense?
I hear what you're saying, those, what's written, the additions are more specific than just saying protect environmentally sensitive areas.
Mhm.
Which, something else for the parking lot, when we get to the land use map, let's have a real conversation about what are environmentally sensitive areas and make sure that those are being marked appropriately.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought I saw this somewhere else further down the line, and it's probably in the land use section, where we get into the real nuts and bolts of what are we trying to protect. So I don't know that we have to be much more specific under this item. If it comes up again, and I think it does.
We'll work on a combination of both, and we'll bring that back to see if we are
Just a
capturing
thought.
that. Yeah.
No.
I'm just gonna go and say something that's really outlandish here, but objective 4 and objective 6 are kinda, I don't know, probably didn't need to be 2 separate objectives back when we did this in 2016.
I would actually go as far to say that objective 4, objective 5, and objective 6 are all very similar.
I mean, I guess we're carved out because there's enough different policies that probably would have been a bit messy.
While it would be an objective with a lot of policies, would the committee be opposed if we tried to combine those three. I mean, cause one is wetlands, groundwater, other natural resources. One is high quality groundwater, and then natural resources, sensitive areas, flood hazards, wetlands. I mean, they have very similar,
It almost looks like they were separated in order to have the policies more defined underneath each one. That's why I think they separated them. As I read through the policies, they're pretty specific to high water, for example, or to flooding, versus putting them all together and then just listing them.
Yeah.
There's more emphasis the way it stands now.
But then further on, objective 9 is preserve some of the remaining areas in town currently in agricultural production. But then the policy just has nothing to do with that except for making sure that we're preserving groundwater.
Which could go, that one could be combined with the other issue of,
Yeah, but then there's a question of objective 9 probably should exist and we just don't have a real policy for it.
yeah, how would we go about preserving and protecting?
yeah, I don't think we do we?
It's worth looking at.
I would say I always go back on this because if you think of the trees as an agricultural crop, right? Because they just grow really slow. We have a lot of agricultural land, but that's not what you typically think of when you think of agricultural crop. You think of soybeans and corn, but I mean, I think a large piece of this conversation is because a lot of our agricultural land is being purchased and not used for agriculture anymore.
Yep.
And so maybe that whole agenda, or maybe that whole objective really needs to change because that just wasn't the way that we thought about agriculture when we put this plan into place. You're a little early, don't worry. We're just finishing up another meeting. You're okay.
Well, I think we succeeded in creating a lot more work.
I think we'll leave this draft as is. Now that we've had this conversation, we'll do a V2, a
Play
draft
around,
2.
yeah.
Let us bring that back at the next meeting and you can say that looks good or that doesn't look good. Let us just rework some of those and see if we can take out some of the redundancy but still get the main points.
I think that makes sense.
And also remember that 2016 wasn't our first iteration of this plan. As happens, 2006 goes to 2016, now we're reviewing it and possibly adding to it. Where you start with something and then add to it, if you're not removing things, that's how you end up with some of this, or sometimes a lot of policies under specific objectives. And so some of this could just be kind of naturally adding things in as we do comprehensive updates to our plan, and some of that may have just kind of resulted in the 10 objectives that we have here.
This is also a very large chapter. Most of the other chapters don't have 10 objectives. Most, yeah.
This one, I think, has the most objectives, or one of the most, any of them.
Policies would complete the objective.
Okay.
Okay, so then, discussion and possible action referral of any recommended zoning code amendments to Plan Commission. We've just started to create our parking lot. So far, we've got that definition of low density overlay versus zoning change, which we'll bring back some pieces next month on that difference. Gateway overlay, what is it? Where does it exist? And identifying environmentally sensitive areas when we get to the land use map. Then dates and items for future agendas and meetings. Next agenda items, we'll revisit chapter 2 with those updates. And then, we will try and make it through 3, 4, and 5. We'll have the track changes like this for chapters 3, 4, and 5 too. And we'll just get as far as we can get.
Did you wanna start earlier?
If we could, is that a potential? Could we go 2:30 instead of 3? Yep,
Sure.
sure.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll try and remember snacks next month, especially when we have a lawn plant commission that follows.
Yeah. Snacks,
This is
how
a
about
record.
dinner?
Yeah.
Okay,
Date?
May 10th.
So are you gonna do it, all of these meetings in conjunction just before planning commission meetings?
Yeah, we just said that would probably work because half the committee would have to be here anyways.
All right.
You weren't here for that.
No, I
And,
wasn't.
and it fits in 1/4 of the committee's schedule.
Yeah, that's very accurate.
Then we'll call this subcommittee meeting adjourned for today, 3:46 PM. Thank you.
Jeez.